Welcome to the podcast.
Cross and Anchor to go. We're shifting things around and
Shaking it up.
Switching it up. And this is more of a podcast style setup. And we're talking through some stuff that we've been going through at Cross and Anchor over the last several months. I'm Josh, and if you haven't met my beautiful wife, Emily, here she is.
I'm real.
Yeah.
In case, I guess, I don't know if that was ever a question, but
Yeah, she's real.
in case it was.
No AI wives here.
We're going to start the podcast with that clip. No AI wives.
But we wanted to talk about the specifically the last series that we've been in as a church called Watching the Throne, which we'll get into in just a minute. But we're filming this in our new church home.
It's cool.
This is our new church location. And if you're a part of Cross and Anchor, you know, or if maybe you're watching from a distance, you haven't been familiar with our journey, but we just got into this new space.
Yeah.
And we're loving it. We're in Corktown, which is a neighborhood in Detroit. It's Detroit's oldest neighborhood. And it's a really exciting, vibrant neighborhood. And there's a lot happening in this area of the city. A lot of people moving into it. And we're just really excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure.
So we can do things like film podcasts here. We've never really been able to have a space like that.
Sure.
For most of the history of the church.
Yeah.
So
if you live in the city and you don't have a home church, we'd love to have you come experience God in this place with us and in this room. And yeah, come check it out. And I think that there will be people that you connect with and you'll feel at home here. It's a really sweet neighborhood. We're entering into a really beautiful season as a church, and just coming into summer, there's so many great things happening. So
yeah.
just a little invite to you, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I'd like a place to be, then you should come be here.
We'd love to have you. So we as a church, every weekend we open the scriptures,
Right.
and we believe that the Bible is God's word. And so we study it every weekend.
Yeah.
And we've been in a series, one of the longer series that we've ever done,
Right.
called Watching the Throne. And this series is broken up into two parts. We're in part one, and it's really a study of the life of David. And the first part of the series is his anointing as king all the way up until he actually becomes king, which is a span of multiple decades that we read about. And it's a very long journey, but very cool to learn from it. And then part two will be later in the future. We'll go back and we'll study David's reign as the king of Israel. And that's a whole nother different part of his story and journey. But
How old was he when he was anointed versus when he became king?
you know, I should know that.
Oh,
but
sorry.
I don't know it.
I sprung a
That's
question.
a great question. That's a great question.
Because I was just like, well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
maybe I'll chat GPT that, and then I'll come back and I'll have the answer. And
No
we'll edit
AI
it in.
wives, but ChatGPT helps.
I do believe he was a teenager when he was anointed. I don't
Right.
know exactly how old he was.
Yeah.
And then when he became king, some people say he was actually in his 40s.
Crazy.
So long period of time from him being anointed to him becoming king.
Yeah.
But before we jump into like discussing this series, and I think it's really great that you get Emily here, because obviously most weekends it's me preaching, and so to get her perspective is really going to be great. And she would never tell you that that's why it's going to be great to listen to this, but I'm telling you that's why it's going to be great. And we have we've been in this series for 12 weeks. We've gone in and out of it because we've had different things going on at the church. So it's been
Right.
almost 4 months. And we're going to finish it up in the next month or so. But before we talk about that, I had a question for you. So
I don't know what this question is going to be.
Well, if you were to go I'm going to say any when in history, not anywhere.
Okay.
But any when in history.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what period of time? When would it be?
I think that's interesting because I've actually, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I actually don't have a lot of interest like going back at all, because it sounds, anything back from like modern day sounds so uncomfortable. Because it's like, even if people talk about like Renaissance times, like castles and queen, and I'm like, that sounds terrible. Like no heating, no bathrooms. Like I really enjoy modern day comforts.
So you would pick right now?
I mean, I think maybe like, yeah, I think maybe now. I mean, there's different aspects of different timelines and time periods that I think are cool, but not really any that I would want to live in.
Yeah.
Was that the question? Would I want
Yeah.
to live in one?
Yeah. Like if you could go, I was thinking more like dropping into a certain moment
Yeah,
in history,
yeah.
not
Yeah.
necessarily
Sure.
living in that time.
Yeah.
Is there some place or some time that you would want to visit?
No,
No.
not really.
All right.
What about you?
I think I'm not a history buff, but I do enjoy studying history, and the Bible is obviously thousands of years old. So that's what made me think of this question. Is we're looking at the BC or BCE era, and I don't
guess
know.
if I was more spiritual, I would say like, oh, I'd want to go back to when Jesus was on the earth. But like, again, love that. But I get to have the Holy Spirit living inside of me now without the discomforts of what the actual day looked like.
So you got the best of both worlds.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are moments in history that I'm glad I wasn't alive for.
Right.
You know?
I just think of things like the bubonic plague, and I'm just like, oh, that's just like, just terrible.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the history.
But a lot of those time periods needed to happen in order to get us where we're at today. So I'm grateful that they happened, but I'm bummed for the people that had to live through it.
I don't disagree with you.
And I know that there's probably going to be people in the future that look back on 2026 and are like, oh man, that was a cluster cuss. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know if we can say that on the podcast, but.
Well, it is interesting because the Bible talks about how he determines the time that we live.
Right.
So maybe
He knows what we can handle.
Yeah, he knows what we can handle. He's like, Emily, like I waited till 1992 before I put her
no,
on
you
her.
just told the internet my age.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah. No secrets
Strike
here.
one.
No secrets here.
Just kidding.
All right. Well, I'm gonna look at my trusty iPad and figure out what we're talking about. All right.
That's sweet.
So, like I said, this series has been going on for a few months, and we have had different people give messages in the series. Our assistant pastor Jr. Gave a couple of messages so far. Emily gave a message in this series, and the rest have been from me. But we've been going from 1 Samuel 16 to we're going to go to 2 Samuel 2. That's where it's ending. As we record this podcast, we're in 1 Samuel 28 this coming Sunday. But I was just looking back through the messages at their titles, and we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have. I noticed that also. And when I looked at the titles that we've gone through, I'm like, wow, because we were in a different venue when we started this series, so it's that far back. And yeah, you're right. We've covered a lot of different topics, which has been interesting and cool.
Yes, we've seen David go from being a shepherd boy,
right?
Kind of the runt of the litter in his family, out in the sheep fields, being a nobody, to then getting called into Saul's army and into the service of King Saul, one of his close military commanders and confidants, and becoming actually a member of Saul's family. He marries into Saul's family.
Right.
Then things take a turn, and his father-in-law, Saul, goes crazy and starts to think David is out to get him, and basically runs David out of town, tries to kill David. David goes on the run, and he was like living in the palace, the highest height of, luxury and privilege, to then now being in the wilderness and living in caves and just kind of fighting for his life. And where we're at in the story right now is he's actually formed this kind of uneasy alliance with the king of the Philistines. And he decided to go into Philistine country, which those are the enemies of the Israelites, just so that his father-in-law would quit chasing him, because he knew that if he went over there, that Saul would give up the hunt. And when David leaves there, he's going to come back and he's actually going to be king, because Saul is going to get killed in a battle with the Philistines, and David's going
Spoiler
to
alert.
come back and become the king. So we've covered a lot of ground. I'm just curious, is there any section of this series that's like just really, really stood out to you, or something that you want to share that's really
Yeah.
affected you?
I mean, I feel like kind of like what you were saying of like we've covered a lot of ground. Is it's interesting that you can take just the life of someone in the Bible, and I think sometimes people can feel like when you preach through the Bible just verse by verse or book by book, like, you know, especially on someone's like life story, it can kind of be like, what are you really going to get from that? But it's amazing, like the different topics that we've covered, from the Goliaths in our life to family, what's the word?
Dysfunction.
Family dysfunction, to the friends in your life. When you know it's time to go from somewhere, leadership, like things happening over and over again.
Like struggles that just keep
Yeah.
recurring that you can't seem to get out of.
So it's been such a wide, like broad range of things to dive into. And so it's been it's been cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just have to take a second and shout out Pastor Skip Heitzig from Calvary Albuquerque, because his study through 1 Samuel has like helped me so much in preparation for this series. And I've listened to a lot of his Through the Bible teaching that's helped me frame a lot of these messages. And so I got to give him some credit.
Yeah, he's great.
So let's just go back to we're going to come back and dive into all this stuff even more, but maybe we could start with how we even decided to do this series.
That's a you question.
Oh, well, let me tell you.
I can tell you how we came up with the name.
Okay. So you can fill in that part.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not sure if we would do this or not, because I knew it was going to be so long if we really dove into it. Because we're covering like 16 to 18 chapters, and I knew that was going to be like a 4 or 5 month series, and we don't typically do series for that long. But I saw this movie that came out last Christmas time about the life of David. It's an animated movie. I took my kids to it. Before the movie came out, they had done a little TV series with kind of a similar concept that was almost a test run for the movie.
Right.
And my kids watched that and they loved it, and it was well done, and the music was good. And
Right.
we went to the theater and we watched it, and it was a really well done movie, like high quality. And it really brought the story to life and humanized it, and made me even see some of the interesting dynamics between David and Saul, and family relationships, and mental illness, and all this stuff. And I was like, man, should we do this series or not? And I was kind of thinking about it and praying about it. And I'm not sure if this is the best way to make this decision, but we were walking through Target, and I was like, yeah, it was on my mind, like, should we be doing this series or not? And then I looked over and it was like, I don't know if it was perfume or what, but it was like now selling David.
Oh, yeah. They're protein bars.
Protein bars.
They're these gold protein bars called David.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And this is not a plug or sponsored by any means. But I have saw those. I've seen those as well. And that's funny.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a series on David. I'm not recommending that as your way of figuring things out, but
that's too funny.
So we've done it, and I'll be honest, like, as a pastor, I guess this is a little bit behind the scenes. And if you're still watching at this point, you must care enough to have come this far. But
we have much further to go.
Yes. But as a pastor, one of the things that's hard about preaching through a book of the Bible, there's many great things about it, but one thing that's hard is that you're kind of locked into it, and if there's like a a situation that comes up or a season that you feel like your church is in or a topic that you want to address, you're like, I can't.
Sure.
And then sometimes you're coming into a weekend and you're kind of knowing like things that would really be helpful for people. Like you could think of a certain issue that you could preach on from the Bible. But then you're like, well, I guess not. I guess this week I'm speaking about witchcraft because Saul is going and consulting with a necromancer, and that's what this weekend's message is about. And so it's like a little bit hard to take that approach.
But I would say on the flip side, and I can only say this from the experience of having preached truly a handful of times, but knowing your process a little bit, there is that side, but there's also the flip side of like, when you're preaching through a book or a passage, like you just preach what's there, right? But what's interesting is sometimes when you look at the passage and there's kind of a theme or an idea, and you know that it's going to strike someone or some like particularly.
Right.
And you almost are like, I don't want to preach this because it's going to sound like I'm calling them out. And I felt that even when I prepared the message, the David and Abigail message about conflict resolution. And I was aware of a few conflicts within people in our church. And I was like, this is going to sound like I'm like literally trying to call them out on this. And it felt uncomfortable. And I almost felt like I wanted to not warn them, but just like give them a heads up beforehand, like, hey, just so you know, I'm not trying to call you out. But at the same time, that also made me stop and think like, but why would I need to stop and apologize for like preaching what's here? And like God has said it. And so like,
Right.
he knows that people need it. And so I probably shouldn't be shy about it. But there is that level of like, you don't want someone to feel called out. But at the same time, like that's kind of the point of like coming to church and hearing the Bible is to like hear it and be changed by it. So might as well just lean into it. But
Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit of a double side of like, is this going to hit anybody? Or, oh gosh, this is going to feel like I'm, trying to speak to someone indirectly.
Right. Which the way I feel about it is you almost have an excuse in a sense. You're
Sure.
like, well,
That's what the Bible said.
That's just what the Bible said,
Yeah.
But I will say, so I'm talking about, the concern
Right.
that you might work through in your mind about deciding to preach through a book or whatever. But the flip side of that is that you, like what I've experienced even as we've preached through this, is that it's highly relevant.
Right.
And every week there's something that I would never have picked to talk about, but it's something that somebody needed to hear.
Right.
And that's the beauty of God's word, is that it's
Right.
alive and it's active.
Yeah.
And when you just decide, like, I'm just going to preach the Bible and I'm just going to go through God's word, like you kind of leave it up to him to let him do the work that he's going to do. And that's really awesome. And that's the best approach to take. So it doesn't mean that we'll never do a topical series or a different kind of series. We're actually thinking about doing a relationship series over the summer and maybe a series on the Holy Spirit. There's some things it's helpful to kind of like zoom out a little bit and get more of a broad biblical perspective on. But it's highly valuable to just preach through the Bible, verse by verse, book by book. And God is really in that.
Yeah, I think when you preach through the Bible, like, and people experience how like relevant it is for their life, like it's just reiterating that truth that the Bible is alive and well.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that's a cool thing to solidify in people's mind when they experience it for themselves.
Yeah, totally. So obviously a really broad range of topics have been talked about in this series, but is there anything, whether it's like a certain thing that we've talked about, or if it's even just kind of something from the story of David that's been like you had never seen it in that perspective, or it made you think about it differently? What stood out to you the most from the series so far?
Yeah, I think a couple of taking the story of Goliath, that's like a very cornerstone known story of David's life, and applying that to like the Goliaths in our lives was cool. Now, I actually don't remember which one it was, but it was the one of friendship between Jonathan and David. Which one was that one?
Yeah, that's come up a couple of times.
Is that All in the Family?
All in the Family. We talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like the idea of like, who do you have around you? Who's your community?
Yeah, just for reference. So that's 1 Samuel 18, and that message was about like the different relationships that
Yeah.
David had.
Yeah.
His best friend Jonathan, his future wife Michal, and then his future father-in-law Saul. And
Yeah.
it was just looking at all those relationships in
Right.
David's life. Yeah.
Right, right. I think when you know it's time to go, that idea of making decisions to stay or to go, whether it's at your job or at your church or in different relationships in your life, is great. I think JR tackling Here We Go Again, like another David having another opportunity to kill Saul, and like kind of the same things happening over and over in your life. I think that was really good. Honestly, this last weekend, Alliance with the Devil, how do we know when we're compromising, was really great. So
Right
thumbs
on.
up all around.
Yeah. What do you think has been the thing that has hit you the hardest in this series? Like, what's been the most challenging for you?
I think like because I generally know the story of David, but I think to really watch like the ups and downs of his story, the good decisions and the bad decisions. Sorry, my voice is
No problem.
struggling. It's been encouraging because it's just like I knew he was a relatable guy, but like he kind of goes on both ends of the spectrum. But then to also see just the really challenge of his relationship with Saul, like through and through and through and through, has been also interesting to follow and to learn from. Because this one relationship brings out like all of these different things, which has been cool, you know? Yeah. What about you? What stood out to you?
Yeah. There's been a lot that has stood out to me. I think we did a message a while ago called The Dark Night of the Soul, and talked about that phrase and that concept that was popularized by a Catholic monk, San Juan de la Cruz, Saint John of the Cross. And the way that he meant the dark night of the soul and the way that we refer to the dark night of the soul in today's world is actually kind of different. But the way we talked about it in this message was David was literally in a cave. Like he was in maybe one of the hardest times of his life.
Right.
He just had to leave the palace, not because he wanted to, but because his life was on the line. Left his family behind, left the luxury behind, left the privilege behind. And I'm sure had to be wondering, how is what God promised me going to happen? Because this is the exact opposite of what God promised me when I was anointed all those years ago. And I just think it's so relatable because so many of us go through a dark night of the soul, and we feel like it's the sun is not shining, and it's like hard to even know sometimes how we're going to make it through, and feel like we just need to breathe. And and one of the key elements in that passage was that it says that David, I'm just gonna pull it up so I don't miss it. 1 Samuel 23, verse 28. So Saul returned from pursuing after David and went against the Philistines. Therefore, that place was called the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi. And we just talked about how when you're in a dark night of the soul, that you need to go to the stronghold. Like you need to go to the place where there's refuge, where there's sanctuary. And it was really interesting timing because we had just moved into our new space as a church, which happens to be on the second floor of this building. And you can kind of look out from here and see the city, and you can see the downtown area and even some of the new stuff that's going up. And you can kind of see some of the history through the buildings that are around us and older houses. And this place, my heart for it is that it would be a sanctuary, that it would be a stronghold, it would be a place that you could run to and find refuge and find sanctuary and get an elevated perspective on your situation and meet with God and know that you're safe. And so, yeah, we all need places like that and people in our life that are able to do that for us. And I really like that message
Yeah.
or that chapter.
Yeah, there was one, I think it was called Leadership Lessons from David and Saul. And just the way, like, you were able to kind of, show their leadership, even just within that one chapter, which I think was 1 Samuel 21. Is that right?
Sounds right.
Just the difference in, like, how Saul kind of, like, drew people to himself because of, like, his self-pity and, like, how insecure he was and all of that. And he, you talked about how good leaders or bad leaders make, let's see, what did you say? A bad leader makes people worse and a good leader makes people better. And just, there was just kind of this juxtaposition of Saul's leadership versus David's leadership, and how David was able to lead from a place of, like, he knew who he was and he knew what God had promised to him. And Saul was also leading from a place of he knew who he was and he knew what was being taken from him, and, like, and how they both responded to something that it's interesting looking at it in the perspective, like, they both were promised, or they both had a kingdom, so to speak, but one was losing it and the other didn't have it yet. And how they both kind of responded differently to something that they wanted but wasn't theirs really anymore, or wasn't theirs yet. And how, the leader in both of them, like, that brought something out of them. And one was good and one was bad,
Yeah.
And neither perfect. Like, David wasn't perfect and Saul wasn't perfect. And so it's like leadership, like, it reminds you that, like, your leadership doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be built on who you know that you are and who you know that God is. And, like, that is what's going to pull, like, the good things out of you.
Yeah. And we've all had to deal with an insecure leader that is looking for things from people that are only really going to be given to them by God.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times our insecurity will drive us to do stupid things.
And I don't think we necessarily, like, I don't know how, like, what's the word? Sympathetic we have to be or should be to Saul. But I will say, like, I think even in our lives and in our history with leadership, meaning we have served under leaders a lot before. And I would just say my sympathy and my understanding of leadership has changed as we have become leaders ourselves.
Yeah.
And I know back in the day there was maybe certain things that were said to us or we were a part of or that were done that were really maybe hurtful from leaders that we had had. And they were hard to work through and they were frustrating, and it was, and we've only kind of really ever been in the ministry world. So, like, a lot of our hurt would be considered like ministry hurt or church hurt, but whether, like, you're in a job or in a family or in a relationship or whatever, but, like, there was things that was maybe said or done that was really hard in the moment and we could have really carried with us. And I think it was a kindness of the Lord for us to experience some of those things from leadership. But now being in ministry leadership as, the lead family, if you want to call it, just my sympathy and my compassion has completely changed for the leaders we've had in the past, because not to, like, never a moment of, like, dismissing some of the, poor decisions or the hurt that was given. But just so much more understanding of, like, it is so hard. Mm-hmm. It is so hard to lead, and it's so hard to lead when your lives are under a microscope really, but no one else's is. And I just think that it's good that we had the experiences that we had, because we were able to like see God work in those, and then it's like informed how we lead now. But it also has given, at least me, such a whole new level of grace and understanding for some of our past leadership, and just being like, it's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And I think when we go through this series with Saul and David, I have heard their story, and we probably spend more time studying their stories than we do lots of other biblical leaders or kings even.
Sure.
Like that happens in like First and Second Kings or First and Second Chronicles. But I tend to put everybody, like I'm like, either everyone's a David or they're a Saul. But when you look through the story of the kings, there's like a lot of in between, you know? There's a lot of...
And when you read First Kings, it's like, there was this guy, and he did this and this, but he didn't remove, there was some idol that a lot of them didn't remove.
Right.
And it was like
the high places, a lot, they say he didn't remove the high places. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, they were so close.
Right.
And they're like, they followed more after the Lord, but then some guys, it was like, they followed in the ways of their father, and they didn't do this one thing. And I think it just shows you, like, you can be so close, but still miss it.
Yeah. And Saul and David are great case studies. And obviously, we want to be more like David, who was the man after God's own heart. And really what separates Saul and David, and we're going to talk about that more in the next few weeks, because their stories start to kind of wrap up their lives together.
Right, they're dynamic.
They're dynamic. But what really separated Saul and David was the reason David's called the man after God's own heart. What that means is that he had a heart inclined and willing to do what God wanted him to do. Like he wanted to obey God and do what God said. And Saul was given many directives from God and disregarded them, disobeyed them, chose instead to please people instead of to please God. And so there's this real big distinction between Saul and David, and that is that Saul kind of hardened his heart and chose to disobey God time and time again, and David obeyed God. And when he ever got off track, which he had many times when he got off track, and we see that in his story. Like we think, oh, well, he slept with Bathsheba, and that's like in part 2 of Watching the Throne. But even before then, there's lots of like missteps, and he shouldn't have done this, and he didn't really trust God, and he got more upset than he should have. There's all these like little things that he did that weren't quite right, but his heart remained open and sensitive to what God said and willing to correct when he erred. Whereas Saul was like, eventually Saul can't even hear from God. That's what we're studying this weekend. It's so sad because he's seeking God, but God's not speaking to him. And so he resorts to calling up Samuel from the dead, because the last time Saul heard from God was through Samuel. And so he's like, I got to go back and I got to pull up the ghost of Samuel to hear from God.
Which is crazy.
And what does Samuel say when this actually happens? This is a whole, we don't have time to get into all of it. You'll have to hear the message. Because even the sorceress or the necromancer seems surprised that Samuel does actually come up from the dead, like almost like she was a scam artist. And when this actually worked, she was like freaking out. But then it actually never says that Saul saw the ghost. It says that she saw Samuel, and Saul says, who do you see? And what do you see? And so she almost is like a medium, kind of like giving the information. And what does Samuel say to Saul? He tells him the same thing he told him the last time they saw each other, which is, hey, like nothing's changed. Like the kingdom has been ripped from your hand and it's going to go to David. And the very last words I spoke to you are the same words I'm speaking to you now. And it's a really it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And Saul's fate was sealed, so to speak. But God had given him opportunity after opportunity. And when God is not speaking to us, the truth is God's always speaking to us. And the truth is that God had already spoken to Saul, but he just didn't ever do the last thing God told him to do. And so God quit telling him things because he didn't obey the last thing he heard. And so I believe that Saul's just, even if God had told him to do something, he wouldn't have done it. Like he had already decided to disobey God. And so the message was going to be no different to him. But yeah, it's a real tragedy, like how his life ends. And one of the things he says to David after he's like crying crocodile tears when David spares his life again, is he says, I'm a fool and I've erred exceedingly. And there's a commentator that says, like, never has a more accurate and shorter autobiography been written. And it was Saul's life. Like, I'm the fool and I've erred exceedingly. Like, that's like the story kind of his kingship. And one thing I'm talking a lot, but I'll wrap it up, is that the story of Saul becoming king, it starts in the morning. It says that the sun was rising and Samuel spoke to him to come with him. And that's the day that he was anointed to be the king. And then when he receives the message that Samuel gives him through the sorceress, Samuel says, like, hey, you're actually going to be with me really soon, because this battle you're going into tomorrow, you're going to get killed and your sons are going to get killed as well. And so Saul's story starts in the morning and it ends in the dark of night, because he seeks the sorceress in the middle of the night disguised, because he's not supposed to be doing this. So his story has a bright beginning, but a dark ending. And God doesn't want us to have that ending. Like, he doesn't want our story to go, end in the night, so to speak. Like, the Bible talks about those who look to the Lord are radiant and they shine like the stars. And you go from glory to glory and grace to grace. And so God wants to brighten up your life as you continue to follow him and not have it end in darkness. But yeah. Any other thoughts from watching The Throne Part 1?
I mean, I think there was a lot of things that that are really great. You talked about, and it was in the upper hand, the message, the upper hand, 1 Samuel 24. Revenge is natural, forgiveness is supernatural. And I think that idea of forgiveness is hard for a lot of people, understandably so. And so I think that was good. Like when that encounter with David and Saul in the cave, and, David cuts off the corner of his cloak and then he calls out to him and they have this interaction. I think Saul's that just is such an interesting story to me. And Saul's big waffling back and forth of I'm going to kill you. Oh, I'm crying over you. I'm sure that there's someone out there that would ask you this theological question. So here you go. The Bible talks about how God sends this afflicting spirit upon Saul and his mind. And so he makes these crazy decisions and he does these crazy things. What would you say to someone who kind of struggles with that idea of that, was God doing this to him? Was this even his fault that he was feeling this way? I think even within the mental health world, we can wonder is God doing this to me? Why is my mind warring against me? And we see this really play out in Saul, and Saul's just not a good guy, but there is this level that you feel kind of bad for him, because you're it almost seems like he's out of control of his decisions, or again, he's being afflicted by something. And I think if we're all honest, we can feel like that. So how would you respond to that, to someone that struggles with what Saul's kind of dealt? The hand he's been dealt with.
I guess my first thought to that is, I would not immediately assume that because you're struggling mentally, that there's a spiritual problem.
Okay.
And I just want to caution people against that, because I think the church for a long time has maybe done a disservice where people who are struggling with their mental health, there's this assumption that there's something wrong spiritually.
Sure.
And that they need to get that fixed. And I think that it's almost like people who are physically sick saying, you don't have enough faith, you know? So if we wouldn't do that to somebody whose, spleen is out of control, why would we do that if they're struggling with their mental health? Why did I
What
say
side
spleen?
effects if your spleen was out of control?
I don't know, but I don't want to know.
I don't
either.
even know if you need your spleen. I think you can live without it.
Yeah, you probably can. But I would say in studying Saul, let's not say every person who has a
Right.
mental health struggle is Saul, which I know you're not saying, but
Yeah.
just so people understand. So studying Saul, though, his specific circumstance, he was afflicted by this evil spirit after he disobeyed God,
Okay.
like clear commands from God. And Samuel tells Saul when the kingdom is ripped from him, he says that he's like, burnt offerings and sacrifices, like obedience is better than that.
Yeah.
And then he says, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. And so we think sometimes as Christians, like, oh my gosh, this person's out doing occult practices. They're so evil. But in God's mind, rebellion, willful disobedience against his commands is like the highest high of sin. And so when Saul walked into that deliberately, because keep in mind, Saul is a person who has direct access to Samuel. He has almost like the easiest way to communicate and hear from God.
Yeah.
And he willfully disregards that. And therefore he opens himself up to the enemy. So now again, is that every person's circumstance who's dealing with a mental health issue? No. But just looking at Saul's circumstance, that's what the root cause was. So is he responsible for his really volatile, anger
Yeah.
and temper? Well, I think he would not have been like that had he not been dealing with that evil spirit. Like his demeanor earlier in the book is much more godly. But that doesn't mean that he's off the hook, because
Right.
it was his willful disobedience that put him in this position to be dealing with this evil spirit. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just
I don't know. I'm
my
just trying to
first thought.
ask
What
the
people might.
questions that the people might be asking.
Well, yeah, let's ask this, because we're kind of wrapping up, but I know people might wonder about this, and we haven't had the chance to deal with it in the message series, because you can't, even when you're going by chapter through chapter, you can't deal with everything. But so David marries a few women.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
I know when I preach the David and Abigail message, Velvet Steel, and it's like this great picture of conflict resolution, and David's all upset about this guy, and then Abigail comes and talks him off the ledge and reminds him of who he is. And it's he listens to her, and then God brings justice, and it's this is great. And then he's like, will you be my wife? And I'm like, okay, that's a little weird, but that's fine. And then literally in the next verse, he takes another wife. And I'm like, dude, we're supposed to like you. We're supposed to look to you. You're a man after God's own heart. What is the deal? And I think I referenced it in one of the messages of it's interesting, sometimes you see these people of the Bible, and you can kind of, depending on how much of their story you get, you can kind of identify some of their Achilles heel a little bit. And I'm not saying that this is true. I don't know necessarily, but David has this thing, with women, and it's kind of a bummer. It's and I think we can be honest about that there are people that we look to. This guy wrote the Psalms, but not everything was right. And I'm not trying to answer the question. I just am kind of setting it up of yes, there is this track record with do we have to do the multiple wives thing? Can we just keep some things? I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
So go ahead and answer that. Why the multiple wives?
Well, I was asking. That was a great response. Yeah, I think that just remember that just because the Bible tells us something happened isn't the Bible endorsing that
Sure.
happened. So when it says that David got multiple wives, or that Solomon later is going to have,
Yeah.
300 wives and 700 concubines, like that's not an endorsement from God. It's just a description. So not everything in the Bible is prescriptive. Some of it is descriptive. And
It's good.
what we find oftentimes, and this is true throughout the Bible and in our lives, is that the sins of the father like multiply into the sins of the son and like the next generation. So David is having an issue maybe with women, right? So he has, however many wives he ends up having. But then look at Solomon.
Yeah.
Like Solomon takes that and multiplies it times, infinity seemingly. And we see that with like Abraham and Isaac. Abraham lies about his wife being his sister. Isaac gets into a tough situation with Rebekah and lies about Rebekah being his sister. And then Jacob is kind of this like deceptive, manipulative guy. And that sin works its way, through the family tree. So David had not, I think it's important that we don't judge people. I can't think of the phrase, but it's this phrase that talks about like having time superiority. Like, because I live in 2026, like I am better than you who lived in, 500 BC. And so we have to understand that this was a different culture. So it doesn't mean that this was right, but it means that this was more commonplace. So David taking multiple wives wouldn't have caused anyone to bat an eye in that time period. And he wasn't necessarily violating any laws by doing so. Again, it doesn't mean that it's correct. But when you look at the nation of Israel compared to the pagan nations around them, and the practices of the nation of Israel compared to them, like on a moral and ethical ground, they were on a much higher level than the nations that surrounded them. And over time, Christianity is actually going to be the religion that liberates women, that elevates their position in society, and that like kind of like lays the groundwork for human rights as we know it in the world today. So we just have to understand that the time people were living in maybe influence some of their decisions. Just like today, if somebody smokes, you might be like, oh my gosh, how in the world could you do that? But if you live in the 1970s and there hasn't been all this research done on smoking and everyone around you is smoking, you wouldn't even think twice about somebody smoking, And so that might play into this a little bit as well. But the Bible does say, I believe it's in Deuteronomy, it says specifically for kings to not multiply wives unto themselves. And David did that. Solomon did it even more so. And that was the thing that tripped Solomon up more than anything else. It said that his wives caused his heart to be drawn away from the Lord. So,
Well, kind of like you talked about it in Alliance with the Devil, like that idea of how generational things happen. And like, if you are barely going to church right now or barely part of community right now, like your kids are going to be even less than whatever you are right now, your children are probably going to be less than.
What's neglected in one generation is abandoned in the next.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate what it means to assess like our family tree and our childhood history, and not that we have to like dig into everything and figure out all the traumas and triggers and stuff, but like at the same time, I think it is good to assess like where you came from, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and do the work not just for yourself, but you're doing the work for your kids and for generations to come. When we can say, oh, anxiety runs in my family, or poor finance handling runs in my family, or this, that, or the other. And like I've heard it said like it'll run in your family until it runs into you, and it can stop with you. But we have to do really hard heart work to stop generational things, and we see that in the Bible of what happens when you do and when you don't.
Yeah. Well said. Well, that's pretty much it in terms of talking through the series.
On a side note, because I didn't mention this, why did we call it Watching the Throne?
Oh, yeah. Why don't you tell the story? You
Well, let me set the scene. I'm just kidding. We're driving in a car in Miami, Josh and I in the front, and some of our dearest friends, Chelsea and Aude, in the back. And I don't know how long before it was actually not long before the series started that we came up with this name, which is kind of how things roll around here. But Aude is a Detroit musical artist, one of the best in the game.
Yes.
And Stoop Lee is his performing name. And is that what you call it, performing name?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. And he has a way with words, he writes music. And so, him and his wife are just very creative, and they're younger than us. So we knew they're going to know more than we know as far as trends and stuff like that. So I just threw it out to him and I was like, Aude, can you give me a good name for this series? And this is one that he offered right away. Now, what does it refer to?
Well, I don't know all the details because it's just not something that
We're just not that young.
But it's like I think it's like a Jay-Z or a Kanye West or combined. They did something
I don't
called
know.
Watch the Throne.
Yeah.
So it was like a play off of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a little bit of, fun, like pop culture in there.
Yeah.
And, but it was also that idea of the throne is there. The throne was promised to him, but he wasn't on it yet. So that idea
Right.
of watching the throne, and also when you're watching something, you're typically learning from something. And I think he was learning from Saul on the throne, and learning from that and what that would look like for his future when he
Right.
was sitting on the throne,
Right. Like God used Saul to crush the Saul out of David.
Right.
And David, another meaning kind of that you could take from that title is that David was watching the throne.
Right.
Saul was watching the throne because he was afraid of losing it.
Right.
But David was watching God's throne, trying to please God. He didn't even care so much about getting the throne. His main goal was to please God. And when he writes this in the Psalms, delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And so he was pursuing God. Saul was pursuing the throne.
Yeah.
But God gave David the throne because David was pursuing God.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Great series.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thanks, you too.
Good job preaching it.
Yeah, you too. I'm excited to have more conversations in the future and dissect different message series and even answer questions if there's any like Bible questions, whether or not it's something that we're talking about currently at church. We would love to get into that.
Josh will answer the Bible questions.
Yeah, well, we'll do it together. Emily is like she is the heart of our church in physical form, and so having her here and doing this together is awesome. But if you want to send in questions, you can DM us on socials, or you can email us. Maybe we'll make an email just for this, but you can email info@crossanchorchurch.com and
Yeah.
we'll get to those. We'd love to answer any questions you have about any topic, any subject,
Yeah.
any Bible thing. And even if you have prayer requests, we'd love to be praying
Sure.
for you.
Sure.
So that's going to do it for this podcast. Any closing thoughts?
No. I think we gave a lot of thoughts. Just
Yeah.
that the squeakiness of this couch is like the background to the soundtrack of this situation.
Yes.
Imagine if we were like in shorts. How sticky. When you're sitting on
Yes.
and it's humid and
I wrote this down just to mention briefly. If you're
Yeah.
looking for like more to get into the life of David, There's lots of great resources out there that go into his life in depth. There's a TV show right now that I haven't seen, but I've heard is really good. It's called House of David.
Yeah.
And it's on Amazon, I think. Same people who made the Jesus Revolution.
Cool.
And some other like actually quality kind of Christian
And that
entertainment.
children's movie that we referenced is actually really, really great.
Yeah.
It's literally
it's called
David.
David. Yeah.
And would be fun to watch with your kids. And
Yes, I actually showed a clip of it in this series, which was really cool.
yeah.
So we love you. Thanks for watching and listening. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time. Well, here we are. We just wrapped up filming our podcast, going through the Watching the Throne series.
Awesome.
Joined here with Assistant Pastor JR. And August, my son, decided to hop in. Say hi, Augie. Hi.
Yeah.
And JR, before we get to this part, I would love to ask you, you've preached a couple messages in the Watch the Throne series.
Yeah.
Through the life of David. What has stuck out to you, just that off the top of your head, that's kind of like hit you, ministered to you, that you want to share?
Yeah, I think for me, off the top of my head, the number one thing is David's just perseverance to, one, in most cases, stick with God and stick with the call of God in his life and not give up on that. Obviously, he was human and he had errors as well, but
Yeah.
that's it. Persevere.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, we wanted to jump on here at the end and just say thank you for those of you who support this ministry. We couldn't do what we're doing without you, and we consider you a part of this with us. That helps make these podcasts, and not just these podcasts, but the church and what we're doing in the city happen. And so we want to say thank you for that. And if you would like to support what God's doing here, you can go to crossandanchorchurch.com. You can go to the give button, and from there, it'll show you all the options of how you can give and partner with us, whether that's one time or recurring. All of it really helps to further the ministry that God's given us at the church. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and we hope to see you again soon on Cross and Anchor to Go.